Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Thank you all for joining in the room or joining online. Today, we're here to present the Paris Declaration on Nutrition, in which we look at sort of the role that all different actors can play in trying to achieve the nutrition objectives that we've set forward in this Paris Declaration. So, next slide, please. I want just a brief overview of our agenda for today. So I'm going to briefly introduce the Paris Declaration on Nutrition, followed by a discussion around how SMEs can support the Paris Declaration from the Sun Scaling Up Nutrition Bangladesh coordinator. Then we will hear about how larger companies can help support the Paris Declaration, hearing from Victoria Crawford, Director of Agriculture and Food at the World Council for Sustainable Business Development. And then we will hear about principles of private engagement from Lynette, who is the Director of Food and Nutrition at the FAO. Hopefully we have a little bit of time for a small group discussion. There's been a lot of being talked at in these sessions. After a whole week, I think many people are also looking forward to actually talking to each other. And there's a wealth of knowledge in the room. So I'm hoping that we have a few minutes also to interact with each other. Next slide, please. Oh, and if you stay through the end, you can have some lunch and continue the conversation. So that is your carrot to stay through. So the Paris Declaration on Business and Nutrition was something that we launched as part of the Nutrition for Growth event. The government of Paris approached my organization, the Access to Nutrition Initiative, to co-convene a private sector working group, which we did in collaboration with the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition and the Paris Peace Forum. And the idea behind this is saying that, we need to also consider how the private sector can be involved in supporting us in achieving critical nutrition goals. So we developed this Paris Declaration with many, many different actors involved. So it's not just business. We also have investors. We also have private sectors. We also have multilaterals. We also have NGOs, civil society. So this is really a multi-stakeholder group coming together to develop the Paris Declaration. You have a QR code here, so if you want to have a look at the Paris Declaration, the website to read the full text, please feel free. And the idea is that it really provides a roadmap for the private sector and all the different actors to come together to create a healthier, more sustainable food system. Next slide, please. So just to step back, I think the elephant in the room, or maybe the reason that the room is so empty, is this question of the private sector. And I think it's really critical to actually think about, why are we afraid of discussing or engaging the role of the private sector? I mean, ultimately, they provide the vast, vast majority of the food that we eat. I would imagine everyone here, all of your food that you have consumed in the last 24 hours probably was purchased through private sector mechanisms. And I think this is true for the vast majority of the world. So ultimately, we need to be thinking about how can we engage with this critically huge actor to make them create a situation where we have healthier food options. They have a real potential to drive sustainable solutions. Yesterday, Henry Gonzalez, who directs the Green Growth Fund, said, they're the ones who can come up with sustainable solutions. We can come up with small projects, we have funding, but then how do we keep this going in the long term? And private sector can provide those longer term solutions. At the same time, governments, of course, have a critical role. They need to develop policies and put those policies in place in a way that ensures that the private sector doesn't just have a free pass to produce really unhealthy foods, that they're allowed to market to children. So there's also a critical role for governments and for organizations like the UN-based Rome organizations. So the last session we had was on food composition tables. So there's a big role for other actors to play to regulate the environment the private sector is working in. But we also need to think about actions the private sector can take themselves. Different voluntary regulations, we need to also ask them, incentivize them, and push them to also deliver healthier, more nutritious foods. So we propose what we call the nutrition economy. And I think on the second day we heard this, for every $1 invested in nutrition, you get $23 of return. I think many of us in the nutrition space have heard that for many years. But that's really societal return. That's everything from improved schooling to reduced infant mortality to better health outcomes throughout the entire life cycle. So this is really a long-term ambition. But how does that marry with the economic case for businesses? Businesses are looking at short-term returns. They're responsible to their stakeholders for their annual, one-on-one year returns. So it's a very short-term business case. So our question is, how can we marry this longer-term business case that we know that we need? We need healthier foods for people with this short-term outlook of companies. What laws, policies do we need to create a situation where those come together? And we've proposed a number of solutions. Obviously, these are ones that we are all working with together, things around fiscal policy, sugar-sweetened beverage taxes already implemented by 123 countries globally, ESG standards, so demanding that nutrition is considered in terms of the environmental, social, and governance standards, reformulation and asking companies to reformulate products or demanding that companies reformulate products, looking at benchmarking and labeling interventions. These can all come from the government. So we're interested in what we call a nutrition economy, which is what can we put in place, what standards, laws, policies do we put in place to create an environment where we're getting closer to bringing these two circles together, where the business case and how you make money as a company becomes sort of the same thing, so that we're reducing this sort of short-term views and we're bringing the two cases together. Next slide, please. So we've identified 7 different kind of action tracks within the Paris Declaration. You're welcome to read the full text there. These are around increased financing and investments for nutrition. We're all aware of the shrinking ODA budget, so there's a question of how are we going to fill that? And looking at innovative financing mechanisms, using public and private resources together more effectively is a key way that we can do that. Another one is looking at how we can improve agri-food systems and looking at the investments, tying back to the first one, that we could do to do that. And we've heard a lot today about the importance of investing in different types of agriculture, also for the nutrition of foods. Improving the healthiness of food product portfolios, so asking companies to produce healthier foods. Responsible marketing and consumer protection. The World Health Organization has already issued recommendations that companies should not advertise to any children under 18, that they shouldn't advertise any unhealthy foods, yet no company and no country has implemented any regulations. That's not true. Norway has just implemented regulations, but for the rest of the world, that's still not happening. So despite the World Health Organization recommendations, we're still not seeing this implemented. We need to move forward with some of these policies. Finally, catalyzing support for agri-food SMEs. So we also will hear from the Sun Business Network in a moment about the critical role SMEs play in our food system. Also looking at scaling up food fortification. We had a whole session on that earlier in the week. And looking at how we can improve workforce nutrition and workplace nutrition through healthier meals, breastfeeding support, etc. Next slide. And we've also identified sort of what priority areas each group of stakeholders can take. We've divided this into 4, so governments around bringing in those policies to regulate the market, investors and financial institutions around scaling up concessional funding and embedding nutrition into sustainability reporting, the private sector to improve reformulation, increase affordability of nutritious foods, and to stop marketing unhealthy foods to children. And finally, intergovernmental organizations like the UN-based, Rome-based UN organizations to align on a position in private sector engagement, which we will hear about in a moment, and to define roles and responsibilities and outcomes of multi-stakeholder processes. Next slide. And just a final point about the Paris Declaration from ATNI's side, we also see investors as a critical group of stakeholders with whom we need to engage. So at ATNI, we have 87 investor signatories managing 21 trillion assets under management, and they have all signed up to our Investors in Nutrition commitment. And we had 7 of them sign up to the Paris Declaration, so the 7 here, and they've specifically asked companies to disclose the percentage of annual healthy sales relative to unhealthy sales using one of the 3 proposed nutrient profile models. So it's another group of private sector actors with whom we think it's critical to work with. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to our colleague Asha Fake Kabir, the private sector coordinator from GAIN, Bangladesh. Are you?
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you all hear me? Hello? Hi, can you hear me?
Hear you well.
Okay. Hi, this is Ashfaq Kabir. I'm the private sector coordinator at GAIN Bangladesh. Just to give you all a heads up, there's been torrential rain in Bangladesh for the last couple of days, so my internet connection might be a bit unstable. So just in case the presentation or, if I appear on the screen, we both hang together, do not worry. I will log back in and we will continue the presentation. So if we can go to the next slide. Right. So for this presentation, we're basically looking at the role that the SMEs can potentially play to implement the Paris Declaration. So for SMEs, SMEs often operate in a pretty hostile environment, given the sort of the lack of support in different environments, or the lack of resources, or different lack of access to finance or other elements that can potentially support their business. So if I just shed a bit of light on this interesting fact, local SMEs provide about 80% of total calories in Africa, yet 40% of these SMEs cite limited access to finance as their biggest growth barrier. So if that is the case in Africa, pretty much this is prevalent in most developing countries. SMEs face very similar problems. They often navigate through very difficult terrains and operate with very little support. And the problems are quite uniform. If this is the situation in Africa, the question is, what about Bangladesh? In this presentation, I will predominantly focus on the SMEs and the role that SMEs can play in Bangladesh, with also some examples from our work with SMEs in Pakistan as well, SBN's work. There's an interesting slogan that we can look at on the right side, which is, behind every bite, there is an SME. If you take a moment and think about this, behind every bite, there is an SME. That is precisely the very crucial role that SMEs plays and in food and nutrition sector. And given the challenges that these SMEs have to face, it is often, we can often call them the unsung heroes of our society for still being able to deliver and do the kind of work that they do. Next slide, please. So I want to shed a bit of light about SMEs in Bangladesh. I have to say that Bangladesh is very lucky to have an extremely vibrant, very proactive, and a very dynamic SME ecosystem. If you look at the total SMEs operating, there is, I will say, no database, but the projected numbers are often at more than 10 million, so around the 10 million circle. As you know, most SMEs, some of them might form and continue business for 6 months or a year, and then they might not continue. So it's a bit difficult to come up with a very precise number, but 10 million is about correct number as per projections. If you look at the contribution to GDP for SMEs, about 32%. In Bangladesh, with the 2030 plans that are being made by the government, the SME Foundation, which is the sort of the foundation under the Ministry of Industries that look after SMEs or support SMEs, they're currently formulating a new 5-year policy and from 2025 to 2030. And one of the key goals of their 5-year policy is to increase the contribution of SMEs to 35% by 2030. It is the largest employer in the country, ecosystem or industry-wise, more than 25 million people. Here's the interesting fact: financing gap, $2.8 billion. And estimated global financing gap is at around $5.7 trillion. Again, as I had mentioned, that the problems or the challenges that most SMEs faces in developing countries are quite uniform. And if we look at some of the problems that SMEs in Bangladesh are facing, data shortage, lack of financing, as we mentioned, high interest rates, informal operations, technical know-how. There are also limitations in their business acumen, as well as limitations in marketing, their products, some of the common challenges faced by SME sector. some of the statistics might not draw a very promising picture, but I can tell you that the resilience that the SME sector has in Bangladesh and in most countries in Africa or in developing countries, as you might call it, the numbers do not do justice to their resilience, to the perseverance that they show, and the amazing work they continue to do. Next slide, please. So a very brief about the Sun Business Network, as we are looking at Sun Business Network's work with the SMEs and the role that they can play with Paris Declaration. So Sun Business Network is a global initiative aimed at increasing the availability and affordability of safe, nutritious foods, especially for low-income consumers. It acts as a neutral platform, connecting businesses with other stakeholders like governments, research institutions, and NGOs to promote nutrition improvements in emerging markets. This SBN, Sun Business Network, the Sun is Scaling Up Nutrition, is co-convened by Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition Gain and UN's WFP, World Food Program. In Bangladesh, Sun Business Network is chaired by the Ministry of Industries, and co-conveners are Gain and WFP. If we look at our work since 2016, which is when we have launched, there has been more than 370 plus business members. So these business members are the SMEs that have received different forms of technical training. This training topics can range from right methods of food preservation to right labeling of processed food to preservation of nutrients through right cooking methods. So very technical, very sort of highly sophisticated training modules. So once these SMEs, the food SMEs or food producing SMEs are trained, we enlist them as members of Sun Business Network with a few conditions that they remain committed to producing nutritious food, as well as go by the laws of the country in terms of producing food. So no additives or no harmful ingredients used in foods which may violate or make them non-compliant with the country's laws. Our collaboration is quite widespread with the government as we look to spread our wings throughout the country. So around 10 government agencies, not just the Ministry of Agriculture or the Bangladesh Food Safety Authority. We also work with Ministry of Industries, Ministry of Commerce, as well as Ministry of Food. So our objectives, as mentioned, improve consumer and business awareness on nutritious products, enhance enabling environment, build nutrition-sensitive business ecosystems. Increasingly, we are focusing more and more on gender and environment as sort of cross-current, so ensuring that there is gender parity among the SMEs. So we want to promote female entrepreneurship, woman entrepreneurship within the SMEs, as well as ensuring that we also support SMEs that are focused more on adopting climate resilient practices or green practices, as we like to call it. Going forward, our thematic areas of work focuses on food safety and hygiene, fortification and reformulation. Workforce nutrition is one of our key areas of focus, and market development and nutritious and safe food. Next slide, please. So if you look at Paris Nutrition Declaration, so I'm going to look at some of the themes that are already mentioned and talk about how SMEs can potentially help implement, as well as the work that we are doing from SBN, so that we can equip the SMEs or support the SMEs in implementing the Paris Nutrition Declaration. So improving agri-food.
I'll speak for about 3 more minutes. We're quite behind time, so just the key points.
Sure.
Thanks so much.
I will breeze through. Thank you. So moving forward, so adoption and technology is one of the key areas that we are focusing. So one of the interesting projects that we have done is connecting business with academia. This is also being done with SBN Pakistan as well. So this is connecting the SMEs with the food technologists in different agriculture universities, where the SMEs are trained on using affordable light technology to improve their production efficiency, as well as ensure that the technology that they're using are not harming the environment. So that's one sort of focus of our adoption to technology that we are focusing. Most SMEs are not exactly well equipped, as you have seen, due to the lack of financing, are not into R&D. So process and packaged foods, more research and development to make sure that they're healthy. That is something that we see as lacking. So that's one area that has been focused to support the SMEs to adopt more R&D. So for reducing food loss and waste, again, we are supporting innovation. SBN Pakistan is actually looking at different wastage that could potentially be turned into nutritious bars. So food waste to nutritious bars. So that's one innovation that has been supported. So next slide, please. So we look at increasing financing and investment for nutrition. So SMEs that make investments in production of nutritious foods. So there are innovation challenges that both Bangladesh and Pakistan are doing in order to support SMEs that have innovation in order to promote nutrition. So one way that we are ensuring investment is that once we support innovative ideas, we are also trying to connect them with investments within the private sector. So, and these are not just SMEs, this also includes startups, connecting them with angel investors or equity investors to ensure that they have a solid flow of investments as they look to produce more nutritious food. Improving healthiness and innovation of food portfolios. Again, technology and R&D are important. These are areas that we are supporting. As you know, for most SBN members, they have a commitment to improve healthiness of products. We try to support them in both sort of designing their products or coming up with products that meet our criteria of health and welfare, as well as ensure that we connect them to the right resources as well as the right technical expertise. Responsible marketing and consumer protection. This is, again, something that we take very seriously. There are expansive social media campaign in order to educate. There's also nutrition centers that are set up around the Workforce Nutrition Project, which is supporting the garment workers in Bangladesh. So there are sessions, education sessions that we conduct for garment workers so that they have better nutrition knowledge. Next slide, please. So catalyzing support for agri-food MSMEs to transform global food system. So one of the key things that we are trying to do is we're trying to work with large corporations, and Bangladesh has quite a few, to help them support the back end, the value chain SMEs or MSMEs that support these large corporations. So when we work with large corporations, we try to convince them to invest more resources so that their value chains can also benefit from the profit or the investments that they receive. This has received a pretty positive response from the large corporations, and we hope that in the next couple of months or years, we will be able to have decisive sort of agreements with large corporations to support the SME ecosystem. Going forward, there are targeted investments, technology, sustainable agriculture, food safety research. So these are some of the areas where we want the large corporations to focus on. In terms of scaling up food fortification programs, again, we are looking at corporations that are working on food fortifications to support the SMEs and MSMEs, either in their supply chain. Also, we are also trying to support micro initiatives that contribute to food fortification efforts. I've talked about workforce nutrition. So we have quite a few fair price shops, around 5 to 6 set up in different large garment factories. Studies have shown that garment workers often suffer from malnutrition because of long hours of work in unhealthy environments. So these are some of the initiatives that we are taking by setting up fair price shops where garment workers can buy nutritious food at affordable prices or even on credit. And just to ease the access to for nutritious food. So next slide, please.
Thank you so much for this review of how SMEs can support the Paris Declaration. I think we're going to have to go to our next presenter now. However, I know you have
No
included
problem.
a lot of really valuable information, so we would like to be able to direct other colleagues to have a look at your website and the really interesting information and case studies that you have. So thank you very much. And a
Thank you.
big round of applause for Sun Business Network and Bangladesh. And with that, we would like to move from sort of the SME perspective to the larger multinational company perspective. And we have on the line Victoria Crawford, who is the Director of Food, Agriculture and Food at the World Council for Sustainable Business Development. Victoria, thank you for joining us.
Super. Well, thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. So I work for the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. As context, we're a business membership organization. We have over 250 business members, typically large multinationals, and of them, 60 of them work within the food value chain. And what we do is work with them to support them on delivering sustainability goals. So our work tends to take two forms. Either we work with them setting up a working group where we develop best practice guidance or tools, methods, such as metrics that can support them in improving their performance against sustainability goals. Or the second type of work we do is running collective action projects where we bring a group of companies together with other stakeholders, so with governments, with farmer groups, with other civil society partners to deliver joint efforts. So there's a couple of examples of the types of work we've done recently. We've produced guidance working with companies on how to integrate nutrition into their procurement decisions, and the companies are now looking how to take that up and integrate it in their through their procurement teams. Another example is we developed a plant and protein diversification playbook, again, sharing best practices of the steps that companies can take to diversify plant and protein within their product offerings. And a third example is guidance we've recently produced on fortification. Again, best practice for companies and some of the barriers and enablers that they can take. So I think like these are topics which give examples of the types of actions that businesses are working on in contributing towards nutrition goals. So yeah, we really appreciate the Paris Declaration on business and nutrition, and really see its direction as being helpful in driving meaningful change. I think kind of at its core is we've heard about the critical role that the private sector has to play in driving sustainable, equitable, and nutritious diets. But I think when we saw the kind of list of components within the business declaration, it's really clear that this is about a systemic level change. Business needs to work with other stakeholders as well so that we can put in place the right systems to drive the nutrition economy. Something I kind of wanted to point to is that we are seeing progress. So businesses at the Nutrition for Growth Summit in 2021 set targets. And when we set, so they're smart nutrition targets, and when these were assessed at nutrition in time for Nutrition for Growth earlier this year, what we actually saw was the majority of these were on track. So pointing to the kind of positive examples of what is going well, but also I think what's important from this Paris Declaration is recognizing that if we all come together, we can accelerate progress so much quicker and really drive transformation through multi-stakeholder action. So there's a like clear need for targeted incentives for businesses and for enabling policies that can help drive the nutrition economy. And that's for both the multinationals who are typically our members, but also for SMEs and the rest of the value chain as well. So a couple of kind of asks or examples of that is one is the need to have a level playing field around nutrition. So examples of policies that have contributed to that would be around regulations on trans fats in the EU and the US, for example. A second category is around incentivizing businesses. So the incentive systems that they operate within. One that comes to mind is the system of subsidies that we have, where we really need to see the agricultural subsidies supporting a much greater diversity of crops and nutrient-rich products, which can enable the kind of transformation to more diversified diets and to nourishing the world's population. And a third kind of incentive needed to have a kind of an enabling environment for a nutrition economy is around finance. So we definitely see a critical need for blended finance to scale and accelerate investments in the nutrition economy. A good example of this is the Netherlands Green Deal for plant-based protein, which is looking to boost protein consumption by to plant-based protein by 50% by 2030. And again, it's focusing really on joint efforts, how the public and private sectors can work together to deliver this. So I'm conscious of time, but I think just kind of a final reflection here is the private sector is taking steps to work towards nutrition targets. We need to build this nutrition economy together, and that requires strong public-private collaboration. It really requires for businesses and policymakers to work together to co-design solutions. So yeah, a call and invite for any of you to reach out to us and work with us in building this positive and nutritious future.
Thanks so much, Victoria. I think that some of the key take-homes that I got from that were sort of the level playing field, incentives, and the finance. And I think finance keeps coming up. It came up all week around how are we going to finance this? The SMEs, access to finance was the critical question. And you raise it here for the largest companies as well. So I think that's a really nice summary and take-home message for all of us. So thank you very much, Victoria. Really appreciate it. Big hand for Victoria and her reflections. And with that, I would like to open the floor to our final speaker. We have Dr. Lynette Feld, who is the Director of Nutrition at FAO, and she will be sharing a few reflections on how can UN-based organizations engage with the private sector. So we're talking about sort of the need, as Victoria said, for stronger collaboration, stronger public-private partnerships. What does that look like in practice? How can we actually operationalize that? So we have a few sort of reflections on that. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that, and thanks for the invitation to say a few words. And I just want to be very clear that I'm just going to give a few reflections. This is not a consensus of UN agencies, and it's not intended to sound like there's a lot of that. This is personal reflections from a few ways in which that I have sort of stumbled on working in this area, given different roles that I've had at different points in my career. One of those was working with GAIN, which I was with before joining FAO. And there, when they started the nutritious food financing facility, they charged us, who I was leading the technical support research and evaluation unit, they charged us to say, okay, well, how do we decide what to invest in? Which of these businesses is it okay for us to say these are nutritious food businesses? And together with my colleague Stella Nordhagen, we published a paper on sort of the criteria, and it's essentially drawing on codex and other standards. But it really made us start to think, okay, well, if we're making those investments in businesses, how can you make that decision to say, yes, this is an investment that will actually be aligned with what we are thinking about in terms of enabling healthy diets, more nutritious food towards healthy diets. So that was one. And then two other instances happened. One was well over 15 years ago, when some of you may have been in the nutrition community at that point in time. There was a group called the Micronutrient Forum, which was, funding was cut for it and it stopped. And then a couple years into that stop, a group of researchers asked me if I would be willing to chair a steering committee to try to revive the Micronutrient Forum. And I agreed to do that at that time. Did that for about 10 years, supporting those processes in the startup, and that is now an organization. But of course, we had to develop principles of engagement to make a decision whether we would accept private sector funding or not, because large meetings are complex. And then that transitioned into a role that I currently do as part of my FAO portfolio, which is I am president of the International Union of Nutritional Sciences. And there we grappled with the same challenge. Through those processes, it is just really clear that the nutrition community doesn't see eye to eye on this topic. There are those who are very much in favor of very, very forthcoming, very deep engagement with private sector. And there are those who often for very good reason, say, no, we're not going to engage. And I just tell you again, this is another one of the not me personally, but again, in one of my previous positions, had a lot of previous positions, that's what happens when you get old. I worked for many, many years at the National Institute of Public Health in Mexico, where one of my close colleagues received death threats, and death threats to his children, when Mexico started putting the soda tax and front of pack labeling policies in place. He was leading that effort, and that was very aggressive. So that's not the only place that that's happened. Very, 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 very direct and very personal threats that were traceable to business across Latin America. And so in the Latin American region, a lot of the nutrition community has really become quite firm and really trying to build a firewall to say, there is no way to keep that policy influencing, and therefore we have to build a firewall for that policy influencing, because countries need to be able to make policies that align with their priorities and the public health of their populations. And they're right, that's what governments are for, right? But anyway, this has led us into this very dichotomized and very polarized and often very heated situation. So 2 slides of a bit of a reflection from all of these discussions, and a lot of this stemming from the work that we were doing from IONS, trying to make some decisions about, are we going to take money from private sector, and if so, who and how and why, and how do we manage that? Okay, so first of all, can we go back to the other one, please? First of all, it is important to think about what we mean by engagement. And so we pulled this definition. It is a UN definition from the UN Common Approach to Prospect, Research and Due Diligence for Business Sector Partnerships from 2019. And it states, any type of interaction with business entities with different objectives, ranging from informal talks to discussions, to knowledge exchange platforms, to full-fledged partnerships entailing funding. These engagements may be implemented through different modalities, including but not limited to partnering, and may entail different levels of public exposure. It kind of encompasses all of those different challenges that we face there. Number one, private sector isn't the same. Private sector is huge and it's diverse. Engagement is extremely diverse. We may just want to have a conversation. We may want to exchange money. We may want to promote something going in a direction. We may want to try to help enforce. So there's a whole gamut of nature of engagement that we really have to break down to be able to understand what the implications of that are. Okay, so then we go to the next one. And of course, public sector isn't the same as well. And so what does that what do we mean by exposure? What's the risk, and what are the both real and perceived risks? Also depends on that nature of the public sector that we're looking at. So this was just a few reflections that I put down on paper, having gone through these unintended moments of grappling with these challenges related to private sector engagement over the course of a very long career. So engagement should be purpose-driven, with a statement of purpose for the engaging, both from the perspective of why the private sector is there, but also why the public sector is there. And we can just get rid of, sorry, some of this was related to specific events and so forth. So, but any nature of that engagement, you should think about why, from both sides. Why are we here? Why do we want to be here? And why do we need to engage? We should be transparent and full disclosure of interests from all participants. Disclosures of interests are that you have a vested interest, maybe financial, it may be professional, it may be reputational, it could be something else. So disclosures of interests are important. Accountability, it implies that criteria for engagement could be developed appropriate for whatever that nature of that engagement is. Perhaps relying on agreed metrics for food and beverage companies and retailers, and I can use the example for the IUNS conference, which will be, it's a scientific conference for those who don't know, it will be in Paris in the end of August. We chose to use ATNI, and with a group of people representing that broad spectrum of more pro-engagement and less pro-engagement, came to a cutoff to say, if ATNI score isn't this much, you cannot be a sponsor of this conference. And that was a pragmatic solution to a difficult, we need to finance the conference, private sector, many people there want private sector there. How do we set some standards? And that was one option that is there, it's independent. Our criteria in that instance were independent, transparent, evidence-based, and implementable. So a very pragmatic approach to trying to do that. And then regardless of what the nature of that engagement is, there should be a risk and benefit analysis of that engagement, but also of not engaging. And one of the things that came up in those discussions with IUNS was that private sector, the meeting is usually around 4,000 people, and often half or more of that are students. And industry is one of the major employers of people who have studied nutrition. And so one of the risks of not engaging with business is that whole market that people study nutrition to go into business. That's their choice to do that. And it was having some rules of engagement helped ensure that the businesses that are at the table there are those criteria, but we still create those opportunities for engagement, for example, as students, which is one of the benefits, shall we say, of that engagement. And then, of course, management and mitigation of risks by identifying the types of engagement as per those described above, their alignment with your purpose, right? If you're engaging in something that has nothing to do with your purpose, why are you engaging, right? And defining the specific criteria that can be used to reflect the appropriate balance between risks and benefits for the nature of that engagement that you're embarking on. So those are just some guiding principles that can be thought about and possibly used in different forums. We found that quite useful in the context of IUNS, but they are out there for whatever they may serve. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Lynette. And I think it's a really practical way of approaching private sector. So a big round of applause for a very challenging topic and for being willing to step up to the plate. And Lynette was talking a lot about the other hats that she has worn. And the other hat I have always worn in the last part of my career was being a facilitator. And I always hated panel discussions because everyone zones out. And I see that here. It happens every time. And so I want you to turn to the person sitting next to you, introduce yourself, and for 5 minutes, I would like you to reflect upon what can you in your organization, so this can either be personal or in your organizational capacity, do to support the Paris Declaration. So we will take about 5 minutes. I know many of you are online. You can also think for yourself personally and throw that into the Q&A function. Be interested to hear also your reflections. So find someone that's sitting near you, even better if you don't know them, and introduce yourself and have a quick chat. A volunteer to share your own reflections or that of your partner from the conversation. Great.
We were in the conversation still. So, yes, thank you. Hello, this is Cristina Tirado from the World Food Programme, Bangladesh. I am the Food Systems Resilience Advisor and also livelihoods. And one of my tasks is focusing on innovation. And we are looking for private sector that could help in this task. Okay, so with my colleague, which is also from the World Food Programme, but we headquarters, we were discussing, what are the partners, new partners that could help us to meet our goals on nutrition and on objectives. So Lynette was mentioning, and yesterday was mentioned, we need new partners. And we always forget, we talk about climate change, but we forget about including partners that will serve different and new goals that are necessary. So maybe our partners now should be totally new in the nutrition and food industry. Maybe is something else. Maybe the food industry has to do something else, and we can suggest. Now, in countries like Bangladesh, anticipation is critical. If you don't anticipate a storm, a tropical storm, or something that it comes from nowhere, all your stocks of food, all the production can be lost, okay? So ICT, early warning, all these are private sector that you can partner with, meteorological services that reach the poorest, that are cheap, I mean, in reality. Those are critical. Second, another another package of private sector that could help us a lot is insurance. If you go to a climate change conferences, you will have all these huge meetings of insure resilience that has like 20 or 24 partners, hydromet, many different options for private sector that is agriculture, but fisheries. That's very important. That we are always forgetting the primary producers are private sector as well. Fisheries, for example, in Bangladesh, they don't advance because the vessels are not upgraded. They need more safety and security. And they don't have, they always complain, oh, because we don't have meteorological services that tell us what is going to happen, and they sink. That, together with the lack of insurance, is making that an area of Coast Bazar, where there is a refugee camp with almost 1 million of mostly women and girls, are not receiving enough protein. Now the budget of WFP in that camp went from $12 per month per person to $6. So we need the private sector. We need everybody to help there and in other places to produce protein that it will be healthy, like from the fisheries. So, including different private sectors that are looking into nutrition and safety and anticipation will help a lot. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. Really impressive reflections. I think insurance is a critical area. I know that we're looking at that too in terms of transforming food systems to make them more sustainable, looking at how maybe you stop insuring livestock as well. So you could also use insurance, one, as a mechanism to de-risk, or also as a mechanism to shift the food system, and that we were sort of talking about bringing those two circles closer together. Do we have maybe one other reflection? Or Freddie, is there anything from online that, no? Any other group that has a final reflection of what they might be able to bring back for themselves or their own organization? No, I'm now just keeping you from lunch. Okay, well, in that case, I would like to thank you all very much for coming and having this conversation about what can be quite a controversial topic. I would really like to appreciate the FCDO. They all had to leave yesterday, but they were also very active in supporting this work. I would really like to thank FAO, especially Anne and Stein, who really helped us in getting this session on the agenda. I know they worked really hard. I really appreciate that. Also the IT people. So thank you all very much. Also a big thanks to our speakers, and thank you all, and enjoy the lunch in the hallway. Thanks.